Hello campers, I'm Mr. Gunn. About a year ago, I saw a YouTube video from an incredibly talented camp builder who was doing a camp tutorial when I saw in his kitchen background these amazing double sinks. Now what really caught my eye was he somehow managed to get those sinks nearly flush with the bar counters, and yet there was no wood clipping into the sinks from the bar counters. Any other time I'd merge sinks that low into a bar counter, the wood from the top of the bar counter would clip into the sink, as you can see here. Unfortunately, he never did do a tutorial on how he made those double sinks work so well into those countertops. So we had to kind of take his video and kind of reverse engineer it a little bit until we finally figured out what he was using to make those double sinks work so well. So let's take a look at a few of the simple steps that you can take to make these beautiful and unique double sinks for your camp. All right, to get started, let's go over a few of the items that we're going to need to make this double sink merge work. And right off the bat, we're going to need the Old West bar counter set. You're going to have 2 rows of these bar counters in your build for these double sinks to work properly. And I'll give you an example of what that's going to look like here in just a minute. Then we're also going to need the fancy bar set. Now, this is really the secret as to how we're able to get those double sinks to merge down so low that the wood from the bar counters are not clipping through them. And you'll see this recessed area here in the fancy bar set, and our sinks actually merge down into this particular section that you see here. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. And again, you'll see how nicely they merge down. And then these side panels here will cover any gaps in the bar counter itself. So they really give a nice detailed finish to your build, and that's really, I think, what makes this thing so exceptional. And then we're going to need a couple of the clean sinks. So we'll need 2 of those, of course, to merge down into our fancy bar set that we see here. Now, all of these are Atomic Shop items. So if you don't have them, you can get them from the out of the Atomic Shop. And if they're not available in the Atomic Shop, you can submit a support ticket to Bethesda requesting whichever one of these items that you need. They will get back with you and tell you how many atoms it's going to take. You approve it, they'll take the atoms out of your account, and voila, next thing you know, you got these items in your inventory. I do that all the time, and they're, for me at least, they've been very, very quick about turning things around. Matter of fact, one a few weeks ago, I turned in a ticket, and 2 hours later, I had the item in my inventory. So it works out very well. So let's take a look at what we're going to be dealing with, though, with the bar counters themselves. So that's another important step that we want to talk about here before we actually start doing the merging. Let's take a look at what we're going to need to do with the Old West bar counter sets. And you'll see here I have 2 rows of these set up for my countertop, which I typically use. For my main kitchen area, will use 2 rows of the bar counters, and I prefer to have the wood side facing out and not the shelf side facing out. The problem is you really can't put anything on the shelves, and when you come into somebody's kitchen, it looks like they just have a whole bunch of empty shelves around. I think that just kind of gives it an empty look, if you will. So I prefer to have the wood side of these pointing outward, almost as if they're like they're cabinet doors or something like that. I think that's much more attractive. Even my upper cabinets that I have here, you'll see I have the wood side facing out and not the shelves themselves. And that's a personal preference, but that's mine. Now, when we build this, when we put in our double sinks, we're going to need to use 2 of these bar counter sections that you see here. 2 full sections is going to be required. And what we'll end up doing is, I'll kind of show you right here, is we're going to remove the sections where we want to put our bar counter. So I'm going to go ahead and take these guys out in the back row here. I'll store them. And I'll take these guys, this other guy out in the back row here, store him, and I'll store him, and I'll store him. So we're going to slide our double sink merge with the fancy bar set right into this area here. This is where I want to put it, and I'm going to put it here. So you have to take out 2 of these bar counter sections in order for this to work. And we'll come back and visit that here again in just a minute when we actually get ready to start putting this in place. But let's go back and actually do now the actual merging of the double sinks down into the fancy bar. At this point, we need to take our double sinks here, our 2 sinks here, and we're going to place them on top of the fancy bar. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it here, and I'm going to place it up here on the fancy bar like so. And we're going to put one on one side, and we're going to put the other one on the other side. And you want those front legs of the sinks to kind of just come right up to about the edge of that black section, that black marble top there in the recess section of the fancy bar set. That's a pretty good spot right there. We want them to kind of come right up to that edge there, as you can see here. All right, and that's pretty close right there. I think that's going to work all right there. Let's go ahead and place our second one up there as well. We'll kind of line him up right next to it. And it's okay if those sink bowls clip into each other just a little bit. Actually, it looks pretty good when you do that. And again, I kind of want to get this lined up fairly close to where my other sink is on the front side there with those legs on the very front. And I think that looks pretty good there. Let me just take a look here. Now we're going to have to pull this guy forward a little bit. And it's important anytime we're doing these kind of builds that you take your time and get everything lined up. The more time you take to really kind of get this properly lined up, the better it's going to look. It's going to just have that much better detail going forward here. And I'm just kind of moving this thing all around here. So let's get this guy lined up. All right, there we go. And we want to make sure that you have enough on each side so that when these merge down, they're going to clip into this side here, this little side marble top that you see here. They just need to come in right to that edge there so we don't have any gaps. Now, another way to line these up is I jump up on the top just to see if they're straight. And actually, these guys look pretty straight, but they're pretty, oh, no, they really don't. I can see it's kind of, yeah, I think it's a little crooked right there. I'm going to straighten this one out here maybe just a little bit more. If you just grab them there, you can kind of just twist them a little bit and kind of work them around. That's going to work out better. And again, just taking your time really can make a difference with this. And this looks pretty well lined up. I think this is pretty good. You'll see those drain pipes are pretty close to each other here in terms of the way that they're clipping in. So I think everything's lined up nicely. And that's kind of what we want to come out with when we place the sinks on top of the fancy bar. Our next step now is to start to merge those down into the bar. And for that, we're going to need our pressure plate. Let's get the pressure plate. You'll find that under power connections right there. We're going to grab that guy and set him down and place the bar counter right up on the edge there, like you see right there. All right, now I'm going to stand up on top of the pressure plate, and I'm going to get my focus onto the bar counter. So the bar counter should be what we see lined out in green. I got it right there. And then just by hitting your place button and just keep repeating place, keep going, the sinks are starting to drop down into the fancy bar, as you can see here. I'll step back for a minute. We can kind of see what I'm talking about here. See, now we can see that they're starting to lower down nicely into our fancy bar. We're going to keep going. So highlight there. Now, when the sinks get down to this point here, let me back off here a minute. You can see what I'm talking about. We want to lower it so that the top of the sink bowl is just slightly above the black marble sides that you see here. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So we're going to go ahead and continue doing our placement. So we're going to just keep placing, select place, and right about there is very good spot. You'll notice there, get out of build mode here. You'll notice there now that that sink edge is just slightly above the black marble sides that we see here. And that looks pretty good. I think that's going to come out pretty nicely. That looks nicely lined up. And I think we're good to go there. But again, you want to just take these down so it's just slightly above these black marble side pieces here. And I think now we're ready to go ahead and take our merged sinks into our fancy bar and start to place those in our cabinets. Let's go take a look at that. Now, a little earlier in the video, you saw where I removed the two bar counter sections that were occupying this space here. We need to do that so we can slide in the merged double sinks to fill this particular space here. And then we're only going to restore, we're only going to put back in the front bar counters. We will not need to use the rear ones anymore. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. So what we're going to have to do now is let's get out our flamethrower trap, and we're going to run over here to turrets and traps, and you'll find that down here. Now, this is not an atomic shop item, just so you know. You can only get this from a quest. Now, if you don't have the flamethrower trap, see if you have a friend who has the trap. Have them come over to your camp, do a direct team with them. He will then be able to build this flamethrower trap for you and leave it at your camp, and then you can go from there. Just remember not to scrap it when you're finished, in case you need it a little bit later on. If you scrap it, you have to have your buddy come back over and drop it again for you. So when you're finished, just go ahead and store it for the time being. So we're going to use the flamethrower trap, and we're going to need to burn out the counters that are surrounding this area here, so it makes it easier for us to slide in our merged sinks, and we're going to burn out the walls as well. Now I'm doing this in custom world, so when I set the flamethrower trap down, it's just going to start working on its own right off the bat there. So I'm going to kind of aim it here, and let's burn out those cabinets. There we go. And those walls went with it, so that's good. Let's go ahead and grab it here, and I'm going to move it, and I want to burn out these guys here on the side as well. Now we're going to grab our bar counter set here that we got merged in, and we're going to start to slide him into place. Let me point something out here first. Now you'll notice here I'm using a double wall here because I'm using the wallpaper on the inside as well as the outside, but this kind of gives you an idea how close my cabinets currently are to the wall. And that's not really required. I mean, I recommend trying to get them as close as reasonably possible, but I always found that this kind of position here works best for me. And typically when I am putting in my bar counter cabinetry, I always burn out the walls, and because you'll be able to slide these closer to the wall when you do that. And so it's just another tip there to give you as far as placing your bar countertops. So at this point here, we're going to take now our double sinks, and we're going to start to slide it back into place here. And we should start to see some green here pop up in a minute. There we go. We're getting a little bit of green. Now you kind of want to just kind of place it right smack in between where those edges are for each one of those countertops. And I'm just going to kind of position it and start to slide it back a little bit more here, and then we're going to check its placement here. So again, this is one of these steps where you really want to take your time. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. We got them kind of lined up pretty good left and right. Let's see how far back we're going, see how that's going to look here. Now you'll see here that brass rail is going to stick through the wall here. This is my main wall right here, and this is the double wall on the back side here. And that bar counter, that brass bar is sticking through. So and right now I can see where my main wall is, and I can see that when I restore this, it's going to clip right through these faucets. So I already know right off the bat I have this pushed back too far. So we're going to grab it, and I'm going to pull it forward a little bit, and I'll line it up right there. Let's see how that looks. Now here's another little tip. Take your floor and switch it to a floor that has a grid pattern on it. This way it makes it easier to line this up, and you'll make sure it's straight. So I'm going to kind of readjust this guy again here so that he's kind of straight along this line. So I'm using this tile as a guide. Get back to green. There we go. And we'll see if we can't get him to snap right there. Looking at it from top to bottom, it looks fairly straight. Actually, I can probably just fuss with it a little bit more. And again, taking your time with this is really important. Now, you'll get this memory every now and again. This does this in the when you're making these small adjustments, and you try to adjust it again after you placed it. It wants to snap back to where it originally was. And I call that memory, and I don't know any way around that. If anybody's got an idea on how to get around that memory shift every time you make small adjustments, man, leave me a comment and let me know what your secret is, because I can't figure it out. But I'm going to adjust this guy again. Sometimes I got to pull it forward, drop it, and then push it back so I can get it out of that memory error. Again, taking your time and getting everything lined up is really important here, because if this is crooked, you'll see it in the counters. So you want to kind of just make sure we're fairly straight. That looks pretty good right there. Let's see how we are front to back. All right, that's not too bad now. I can see now where my wall here is going to come right in behind here when we restore it. It's going to hide that bar a little bit, so that's pretty good there. But my other problem is this. You'll see this here, this bar countertop, when I put these back in, it's going to clip through the sinks a little bit. So this front bar counter is going to clip through the front of that sink a little bit, because you can kind of see here where this one's in relation to the sink bowl. And when we snap that back in and restore it, repair it, it's going to clip through. So now I have my bar counter a little bit too far forward, and I want to push it back slightly. So I'm going to just push it back to right about there. And let's see how that looks. Jump back over here so we kind of see what we're doing. And that looks good. Notice the alignment of this bar counter when we put it in should not clip through here. I think it's going to work out pretty good. And I got my bar piece back here, and that wall's going to come just behind these faucets here a little bit. So I I think this is going to work out pretty good. Let's give it a try. Now that we have our double sink merge placed into position and we've checked our sides here and everything looks really good here and our front to back is looking good and we're not sticking too far back or too far forward, I think we're ready to actually take our flamethrower and we're going to destroy now the bar counter double sinks themselves. So I'm going to place that here. There we go. And now we're ready to restore the other burned out sections that we have around the bar counter. We're going to restore the bar counter with the sinks last, but first thing is we want to restore everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and get my walls snapped back in, repaired, put back in. So I'll repair that, and I'll repair this wall, and we'll repair these walls here while we're at it. Get everything all repaired. This side cabinet here. Side cabinet here. Anything that's got burned out, we want to go ahead and start repairing. Repair that. I don't know how that got there. And there we go. Okay, so now we have this repaired, and now we're ready to go ahead and snap back in our front two missing bar counters. So we're going to grab those. I don't know if they're in my recent or not. They're not. And let me see here. They're not stored either for some strange reason. All right, let's throw it back over here and grab those back out of our floor decor. And we're going to place our front two cabinets in place here as soon as I can find them. There we go. And we're going to snap that one in place, and we're going to snap that one in place there. Now you'll notice we're not snapping anything in the back section here where the bar is. That's going to remain blank, as you can see right here. That fancy bar set occupies that space, and we don't need any bar countertops in that space there at all. So at this point here, everything looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and do our repair. We're going to repair our fancy bar. Repair our sink. All right, there we have it. And we see now after we got everything all repaired, we got our sinks repaired, the bar counter repaired and all that. And look how beautiful that just slips right into place there. It just does a really great job. Again, it's important that we check our alignment going front and back when we're placing these. That's why it's really important you take your time. Check for those little details. Notice how this front bar counter is not clipping into the front of the sink bowls. That's because we were really careful to make sure that these were back far enough. When we had this merged bar set with the sinks, we made sure it was back far enough that these front cabinets, when we put them back in, were not going to clip through there. So that worked out real well. And notice now my faucets aren't clipped into the wall. That's why the positioning of your cabinets when you put this in is fairly important. You want to try and get them as reasonably close to the wall as you possibly can. And this really worked out well, and it looks terrific there. And again, taking your time, you're just going to get this beautiful results with these double sinks that are merged down into the bar counters. And it's that extra detailing that's just going to make a difference for your friends when they come by and see your camp. And this is one of those ways to show it off. I'm Mr. Gunn. Thanks for watching. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you.